Welcome back to Adobe live from Adobe Max 2017. Are you guys enjoying it for now? Yes? Let us know in the chat. And also, let's have a quick round of the countries you guys are watching from in the chat. That's always very interesting. And for the next hour, I'm here with Huang and Eric Snowden from Adobe. Yeah. So why don't you guys quickly introduce yourselves and let us know what you exactly do and what we're going to be seeing today.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm Huang. I work for Adobe. I work on Adobe XD, which you may have seen launched yesterday. Awesome product.
The first version.
Yeah, version 1. Really exciting.
How did that feel?
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like really nice for the team and everything too. We got everything out. So, yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
I'm Eric Snowden. I head up design for Creative Cloud and Document Cloud. So working with the teams that put the show on yesterday and made all those tools. And
so which do you prefer? Creative Cloud or Document Cloud?
I don't think I can choose. I can't have a favorite.
I choose children.
I like them all equally.
It's little document, little creative.
Yeah, you gotta mix them together. Everybody uses PDF, so you gotta no, it's great.
Awesome. So what are you guys gonna show us? We're gonna go over some of the things we've seen yesterday during the keynote, maybe go a little bit more in depth. And of course, the chat is here for you to ask us questions. So, whenever you have questions, don't hesitate to use the chat. And if you're watching this on YouTube, come over to b.net/live, because that's where you can actually interact with us in the chat live. All right, who wants to start?
You go first, Eric.
Okay, yeah, I'll go first.
All right, Eric wants to start.
Yeah, so I think we have a ton of different things to show. There's a bunch we showed yesterday really quickly, so we can slow down and answer questions and talk about some more details. But the stuff we showed yesterday was really big updates in Illustrator, Photoshop. Ash showed some of the drawing tools, and I showed Adobe Capture, which is maybe I do have a favorite. It's my personal favorite mobile application. Okay. It's just super fun for capturing.
So you have a favorite child, after all.
I shouldn't be saying this because now everyone else is listening, but I don't know. Especially on my phone, it's super fun to just capture inspiration and make it into things later. So yeah, I think that's sort of where we're at. I mean, I can start out in Illustrator. There were a ton of updates we announced in Illustrator yesterday. For me, the properties panel is a huge one, and it sounds like such a simple thing, but the way I always show it off is show what it used to be like, especially on a smaller screen. I mean, your UI takes up more space than your actual work, which is a little bit backwards. And so we really tried to focus in on just getting out of your way. And so I think, Illustrator has 40, 50 panels in it. And just trying to combine that all into one place, and also getting rid of the options bar across the top. And so if you've been using Illustrator forever, you can go back and do it the way you've always done it. So we didn't take anything away from you. We just gave you a new, simpler way of working. And I've used Illustrator for longer than I feel comfortable saying in front of a bunch of people, but it just feels so much easier.
I'd probably win, but...
Yeah, I would get Illustrator off. I was talking to someone about Illustrator the other day, and the world before transparency, when you have to fake transparency in Illustrator, that was a fun time back in the day. But it's great. I mean, everything you end up selecting in your artboards, the properties panel changes and shows you what's relevant to that piece. So I'm not seeing a bunch of things I don't need. And so this is a little bit of a customized workspace for me, but I've got properties, layers, and libraries, and that's kind of all I need. And as an Illustrator user, I don't usually even go deep into layers. My files are a little bit of a mess. Don't tell anybody except for the people who probably already know. But properties and libraries are just sort of the way that I end up working these days. And the nice thing is you can really dig deeper into a specific section. So if I want to get all of my advanced character styles, I don't have to go and find the window, and I don't have to figure out what monitor I put it on. It's just kind of all in one place, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, I think that's super useful. And like you said, it also gives more real estate, removing the bar from the top. Of course, don't be scared. You can have the bar if you want. I mean,
at any point, I can click and go back to a different workspace, and it looks the way it's always looked. And so, I think as we are spending all this time optimizing and increasing making better experiences and modernizing our apps, we don't want to take things away. We just want to be additive, and so you can work the way you've always worked, but we think there's a better way. And there were some awesome tweets last night about people who are really enjoying it, especially on smaller screens. It's funny, I feel like we go through these periods where screens get really big and then really small and really big and really small, and on smaller laptops, I think it makes a huge difference. So that was,
I think too, if you're starting out learning Illustrator, like I remember some of the apps you open them up when you're first starting and you're like, oh my gosh, like there's panels everywhere, hidden panels,
and that's a big big challenge for us at Adobe as well, is to make it easy for people who open it for the first time not to feel overwhelmed and like, where do I start?
Exactly, because it's so much power, but then it's also can be scary.
And the other thing that I always say is like it's very unlikely you're going to be using all of the features of Illustrator, all of the features of Photoshop. It's always like use the applications to do the things you need to do right now. Don't complicate your life, and it's possible.
So someone was saying like, oh my God, there's a lot of stuff on the screen. So I actually zoomed out to show there's even more than you think. So in this file, I've got 212 artboards, and I'm on a laptop, and it's super smooth. I mean, the team has been working really, really hard on performance improvements, and it's noticeable. And so we're obviously changing the UI to make it easier to use, but making it faster, like it starts up much faster, can handle more artboards. Just everything is better. And as designers, we're always thinking about how do we make. We all love Adobe Magic, right? We always love these huge, awesome new features, but we want the things when you go back to your work day to day and you're sitting in front of a computer 8 hours, hopefully you're occasionally taking breaks.
So one question that I had in the chat over time, especially with the introduction of all these multiple artboards in Illustrator, like to 1,000 now, right? People say why, and there's really compelling reasons why, especially for icon designers and people who really have to have like one element per artboard. That was a big limitation in the past. And again, if you don't use 1,000 artboards, that's fine. You can use one.
Well, and I have a file I'll have to try to find later of an icon set from one of the Adobe applications, and I think it's got 600 icons. I mean, within Adobe there are thousands, tens and hundreds of thousands of icons. And so when you're dealing at that scale, like again, you don't have to do that, but if you're working at a company where you need that, we don't want you to not have it. And so I think that's really important. But even though you might not need to support 1,000 artboards, it makes everything else faster too. So even if you're using a lot less, you'll feel it.
So as far as performance is concerned, you mentioned performance as well. So I've heard a number yesterday.
So startup time is 30% faster, and then going from 100 to 1,000 artboards, that's a 10x increase. I know there's been changes in the last few versions to Zoom performance and everything else. The team has been hyper-focused.
Because it went from 1,600% to 16,000%.
Which you can get in so many little details. But
really, fine-tuning.
This is, that's another question that I get very frequently. And I tell you, what can I make the artboard bigger, than the limit? And the question always is, why would you want to do that? Especially when you're working with vector art, is, it's because it's resolution independent. You can keep your artwork at a certain size and then enlarge it to whatever size it needs to be.
And even though Illustrator is vector, you'll notice I have a lot of rasters in here. So there are times you're sort of mixing the two together. You've got some images, some vector work, and a lot of people need that resolution. And that's the thing I love about meeting people at Max. You meet creative people who are doing things that we never thought possible. And so the more we take those limits away, the more people can do whatever it is they need
Diane
to do.
is saying I can see the storyboard that is benefiting from the multiple artboards. That's one thing that it can be used for.
So I think that was a big thing for me. One of the things I like the most. But there was a ton of other updates in Illustrator, some of which I don't even think we talked about yesterday. But some of my favorite things were really around fonts, and so we're both designers, and fonts are I don't know, maybe my first love. Like when I discovered typography, I was like, I want to do whatever that is. And some of the enhancements to fonts in this version are super interesting. So everything from little stuff, like if I go into my font menu, I've got favorite fonts, so I can really condense down that list. Most designers I know have, I don't want to say too many fonts, but lots and lots of fonts. So being able to say like, oh, I only want to see a few of them is like the nicest thing.
Yeah, I remember the time when I had to use like, when I had the whole font folio on my computer, and that was like thousands of fonts.
Oh yeah.
Now you don't even have to think about that anymore, because you can turn them on and off whenever you need to. So that's makes it so much easier. Yeah, let's Chris, can you get the charging cable so we can just put it in the computer?
So the two font things that I ended up showing yesterday, one was around color fonts, and so this is sort of a fun one, and there's some really cool emoji fonts out there. There's Gilbert, which I'm using here, which I really love. And every character inside of the font is a different vector, so they can overlap, they can have different colors. It's really expressive and something that's been, I mean, obviously you could select each one of these and change it, but the way the U and the R look, you couldn't do something like that in the past. And then being able to like just turn that, turn that back into outlines and like, edit individual pieces of this. I mean, it's super interesting, like the things you can start to make out of this. And so it's these kinds of changes to typography that are starting to happen a lot more and more that are really exciting.
I always say it gives a new depth also for type designers to work with.
Right.
Look, to put in another level of expressivity. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Love that word.
All right, expressivity in their type design as well, like adding the dimension of color. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Maybe the last type thing I'll show before you show some cool stuff. Variable fonts is, I mean, one of the biggest changes in typography that's happened in a long time, and it's amazing for designers, it's amazing for the web, there's so many uses, but so this is a variable font called Amstelvar. I think it's an open source font you can get out on the web, but it was made in a way that it's got all of these different variations inside of one font file. And so instead of saying, I want light or I want bold, and then having nothing in between, you've got all of these sliders where you can tweak every value to make it exactly the way you want. So you can find exactly the weight all the way from very thick to very thin. And this is controlled by the people who made the font.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be of quality. Some of these fonts are still in beta because it's a pretty new technology, but we really wanted to embrace that early on in Illustrator, and it just, being able to increase the weight and then decrease the width and do tight fitting.
And that's another question I got in the chat quite frequently about these variable fonts is how does that compare to multiple master fonts from way back?
I think there's some lineage there, but I think it's a modernization of a lot of that. And I know that the Typekit team has been working really hard with OS manufacturers and browser makers, and there are versions of Chrome and some of the other browsers out there that actually support this. And on the web, it's amazing because you can have one font instead of many fonts, and so it's great for actually download speeds. And so there's lots of different benefits to it, everything from file size to having a single file versus multiple to just expressivity. And I mean, if you look at this list, there are a ton of properties. And so, we have different variable fonts. Acumen's another one that I really love. And this has less characteristics, but I mean, it's amazing to go all the way from very heavy to very light. It looks awesome sort of at every
You could do that all day.
Yeah.
Like, and just watch it.
When you get stressed, it's just like...
Well, if you look at some of the characters, like the L, it really changes, and there are some where as you scale it up, and I'll try to find a good example later, as you scale them up, like the $ will go from having 2 lines to 1 line. It's not just thick and thin. It can really, it's almost like breakpoints within the font, like from more responsive web design. So you can have almost completely different versions of something in the same font. And it's
and these are all things that are so important, because when making a small text is not just a matter of, you know, like taking the font and making it smaller, because you know, a lot of details get lost. So you really need to use the font that's right for the size of text that you're using. And I think the example of the dollar sign that goes from 2 to 1, that's a very good example. Simplifying the font as you scale it down. Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
It's also really great if I always run into this problem where I'm doing an illustration that has a certain stroke weight and that you want to use a certain font, but it's like not quite right. And you're just like, this is like totally good for that.
All right, Ash.
Should we do some iPad business?
Let's do that.
Yeah,
let's do some iPad business.
Yeah, so I guess I can start off. This is the piece I was using yesterday.
Just one question here from Sherry before we move on. How do variable fonts translate to the printer?
They're a regular font, so there shouldn't be anything there. These are, I believe, just OpenType fonts.
Yeah.
And so you can see, and some of these are actually shipped. There's, I think, 6 that are shipping in this version of Illustrator, like built in, so you can try them out. And obviously, you can download or buy more.
Yeah.
And I think I saw someone ask about the color font. That was Gilbert Color that I was using.
Somebody in the chat answered that.
And that's an open source font. You can, I think it's on Behance. There's a link to the project of the people that created it, so you can download it. But they're regular fonts, so it should translate great. And you can outline them and do anything else that you would do to a normal font.
So Sherry's really worried about these fonts, but like about the printing. But now, will Illustrator package the font with the settings? Because it's one font, it'll package whatever needs to be packaged. You know. Yeah. Don't worry.
Don't worry.
It's all gonna be good. All right, Ash. Sorry.
Okay,
sorry for the interruption.
No worries at all. Jump over to the iPad here. This is the piece I was working on yesterday. I think the first thing I showed off was that you can use all your Photoshop brushes in here, which is really, really handy. So right now I have like all of these like Kyle brushes, and I don't know if everyone heard the announcement yesterday, but Kyle brushes are now part of Adobe, which is huge.
Wow.
Which is huge.
Yeah. So all of you who use Kyle's brushes, well, Kyle now works with us at Adobe, and all of his brushes are accessible from within Photoshop, for our Creative Cloud members. Creative Cloud membership is cool.
Oh yeah, so I think he has like 1,500 brushes or something.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
He's always like tuning up. Like, I mean, even here, this is like an overwhelming number of brushes, so it's like infinite fun to play with. So that's really great. It means I can take all the brushes on the go with me, which is like pretty awesome, and like use all of these here, letterers, classics, everything, which I love. So yeah, I was just showing off yesterday to the time-lapse feature. This is like honestly the best thing. This like blew my mind because you can just do time-lapse, and like it starts from the very beginning, and I didn't have to do anything. I think that was the big thing. So I can just say after I finish, I'm like, oh, okay, I actually wanted a time lapse of that versus before. You start painting and you're like, I don't even like this. I spent all this effort recording this and I'm not even going to use it, or like you forget or you're out, or it's just like stuff you have to set up. So this way you can just paint and focus on that, and it's like less distracting, which is really fun.
This is awesome. I think this will be great way to share, the process.
Yeah, and I think everyone's always really curious to know how their favorite illustrators and painters so like operate with stuff. So yeah, and the great thing is this also works in Draw, which we didn't get to show off yesterday because we had just so much stuff.
Yeah, we had Rob Zilla and Dan Mumford before.
Oh, cool!
At the very beginning today, and and they're super hyped about that specific feature.
Well, there was one feature we didn't really get to show off yesterday, which was in iOS 11 you can actually drag and drop layers. So, oops, so if I select this, I can actually pull up that drawer, and let me see, Adobe Draw here. I'm like still holding on to this thing, which is pretty exciting. And so like if I wanted to drop this onto like this piece, for instance, I can just add that layer and you can just drop it through.
With all transparency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you can see like, you can draw like a fancy thing and then pop things in. So you can start mixing this feel of like the more vectorized looking thing and then like the super painty looking feel. So that was one thing we did not get to show off yesterday.
Yeah, Greg says, oh, nice, drag and drop. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I was like, when I saw that one. Yeah.
And Jan says, what? That is great.
Yeah, it's super, super useful.
Yep, people love it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I don't know. What else do we want to show off in here? Yeah, I mean, I love these tools. I think they're like super fun to use, especially with the pen now.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to be trapped at your desk all of the time.
Yeah, and one thing I love about the Apple Pencil is that it feels just like a pencil.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't
feels
have a
really
weird
good.
shape, or it's like, it weighs like a pencil.
Yeah, the weight is really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like definitely a huge thing. Yeah.
And it's got all that tilting thing that if you tilt it, you can actually brush in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
The
it's pretty
pencil's
awesome.
really great for that. Not the Apple Pencil, the pencil inside of Sketch. If you turn on its side, you can get like nice blending.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can like open up a new thing and like look at some brushes, I guess. Yeah. What's your favorite pencil in here? Is just the normal.
Yeah, just like the regular
stock pencil.
Yeah, so Sketch.
Is it in Sketch brushes? This one?
Just the graphite pencil. It's like some of the artists you see making things in the gallery. It's just it's amazing, and they're using pretty simple tools.
Yeah, you can. It's like pretty. It's like a really huge variety of strokes, even though it's just one tool.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. Yeah. Super powerful. It's funny because I was very resistant to the pencil.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, drawing on glass. But as I've been using it, I'm like, this is so useful. It's just like the power of it.
And I see you were using the smaller version.
Oh, of the iPad? Yeah. I'm like little, so I have a little backpack.
Okay.
Otherwise, it looks like a spaceman. I basically look like the Illustrator illustration.
All right.
But yeah.
How does it
really
feel
nice.
on the smaller iPad? Did you draw on the bigger iPad?
I've drawn on the bigger iPad, and that's really nice having the big screen. But the portability of this, it actually feels like the first time I have like this like little slate with me that replaces a sketchbook. This is like the first time I've had that, especially with Sketch and Draw.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the people that work on Sketch, you've got painters and illustrators and people who are really pushing this to feel as natural as possible. One of the lead engineers on the project is this amazing oil painter. And so that's one of the things I love about being at Adobe is this mix of like art and science, and people don't end up at Adobe for no reason. It's people who love this stuff. And so seeing him do these awesome oil paintings on the weekend and then get inspired by that and bring it back to the product is...
Is Brian Yap still working on these things?
Yeah, we work with Brian. I mean, his stuff in Illustrator Draw is like... He's so good, it makes me like a little bit angry.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's really, really beautiful work.
I know that Brian Yap always, like, he even managed to do such complex drawings that he got to the limit.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing what you see people even do on their phone with their finger. Like, these beautiful photorealistic paintings you would think are possible. It's like, I mean, not everyone has an iPad, but all of our drawing apps work on the phone as well. And so
which is awesome.
It's pretty amazing being able to do that.
Yeah, the one brush that I was really excited about is like the watercolor brush, which like it actually feels like, let's like turn this way up. Like what's really cool about it, if I just like lay in some color here, and then I'll put in like a different color, like a purple or something, and it actually like really spreads like you would imagine real watercolor. So you'll see the edges start to like fuzz a little bit, and you can mess with how quickly or how like slowly that goes. But what's really cool about this is like once you like where it's like flowed to, you just like dry it, and then you don't have to like wait. And if you've done watercolors, like I'm always too impatient, so I'm always like messing up my watercolors in real life. So that's like a pretty cool thing as well.
Yeah. Cool. Athi, you have something on your screen?
Capture?
Ready to
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk
Capture.
about Adobe Capture. And someone was asking about iPhone and iPad. So it's iPhone, iPad, it's also Android. So if you have an Android phone, you can get it as well. So not just for iOS. And so Adobe Capture is actually one of my favorite applications. I'll show you guys the icon here. And the reason why I love this is just it works off of your phone's camera, right? So it takes things from the real world and turns them into objects you can use. So these are all actually vectors that I've taken photos of just in Capture and vectorized them. And some of them you can get some like pretty cool details. And so a couple of these are from Japan and other travels, and just being able to capture these elements and then use them inside of any of Adobe's applications. You know, colors, so I'm actually capturing a lot of colors from TV shows. So I've got Iron Fist and Blade Runner and a couple other things in here where something will be on the TV and I'll just capture the colors and want to use them somewhere else or use them as a starting point or inspiration. Materials, so you hopefully...
That's new.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
So Dimensions launched yesterday. So Adobe Dimension is a 3D tool for graphic designers. So the idea that 3D is really, really hard to learn, and we're trying to make it easy for all of us, including those of us who actually work at Adobe, right? We want it to be easy. And the great thing about material capture here is that you can find like a material in the real world, you can capture it, it'll create this repeatable pattern. So if I click on one of these, it'll show me like a 3D model, and I can actually rotate it so I can see like different angles of this. And so this is a wood beam inside of the Adobe Office. And so the Adobe Office in San Francisco has like these, I mean, you've seen it, these beautiful wooden beams. And so I captured it and made a material out of it, and then you can just drag and drop that on top of a 3D object inside of Dimension. It looks real. Patterns are super fun, so it creates instantly repeatable patterns. So I've got some more organic things. These are fun. So I made some shapes inside of Shape, and then I reused them in Pattern to get this black and white effect. And so these are sort of these amazing like things that I could never draw.
Yeah, that's another application that you can like spend a lot of time with and lose yourself inside. Yeah. And
then brushes to use inside of Photoshop and inside of Photoshop Sketch that Ash was just showing.
Yeah. Maybe you want to show the process of doing
this one is actually like one of my favorites, like, and it's hard on like a smaller screen like this, but we'll have to try this one out in Sketch. You can actually draw and drag out like the tentacle and make it as long as you want. Some of these repeating lines are really easy and nice for like cross-hatching, which is a lot of work, so I can actually sketch and with my finger just do really simple cross-hatching, which anybody's done that in real life, you're gonna have carpal tunnel or something. But the one I'm like super excited about is type capture, and this is something we've been working on for a while. So the idea that you see a font in the real world, you don't know what it is.
Are you looking for a font?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Well, I've got an image on my camera I can use because there aren't as many fonts around as you would think. They're all far away. But you can just take a picture of a font and it'll detect what it is. It'll show that font inside of all of your Adobe applications. It's in Typekit, it'll just download automatically, so it's really seamless. And then you can apply it to your canvas. And so, you know, it's got the camera here. I don't have anything on my screen, but if this is super dangerous, I'll grab something.
The type that's behind you, would that work?
Well, this is the type I was actually using yesterday in the keynote. So this is a postcard from Behance. So let's pretend I actually have the postcard with me, which I have lost somewhere along the way. You know, if you take a photo of this type, it's going to actually give you a similar font. So it doesn't just give you one, it actually gives you a number of fonts. And the further away you get, the more different they are. So you can start to find, you know, maybe something that's a little bit like it, but a little bit different. But and then if you go into edit, you can create a character style. So you're not just detecting what the font is. I can decide, I want it to be bigger, I want it to be smaller. You know, I want to change the leading, I want to change the size, or make it all caps. And if I save this into a library, it's going to show up in all the Adobe products, mobile products.
As a style?
Yeah, as a character style.
As a character style.
And Ash and I are sharing this library, so she'll have it too. So it's really fun to actually create these shared libraries and contribute things to them and share them among multiple people, and it makes it really simple. And so, yeah, just, I don't know how many times in my life I've seen a font, I've been like, what is that? I know what it is, I want to use it, or I want something like that. And the type capture feature makes it super simple. And so we've got a ton of different types of things you can capture in here, and it's just a really fun app and great for inspiration.
Yeah. So basically, we have shape, we had the patterns, we had the colors, and now, no, we had another
brushes.
Yeah, brushes, and now we have the textures.
Yep.
And the type.
Yep.
So 2 new additions.
Yes, yesterday.
That's pretty awesome. And this is really the core point of Creative Cloud is that everything Eric just did on his phone, this seems seamlessly to whoever, you know.
Oh,
he said he shared the library with you. Well, all the things that he does will then automatically be shared and usable.
Yeah. And someone asked, Capture is on iOS and Android.
Yes. Yeah. Adobe Capture.
Adobe Capture.
Some great new tools. That's right, Greg. No, I didn't even say it. You know, like yeah. Sarah's happy too.
That's awesome.
It doesn't create the font. I don't believe it searches to add it. Yeah, it actually searches for similar fonts.
Right.
Yes,
Yep.
it actually sees the font structure and it finds fonts that are similar. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't recreate it.
Yep.
That's in the future.
Someday.
Yeah, someday. Or yeah, and the materials are awesome too. So, so like Eric mentioned, yesterday we launched what used to be Project Felix, which was beta. Yesterday it got a name. It's called Adobe Dimension, and basically it allows graphic designers just like me. I'm a print designer by trade, and it allows me to work with 3D objects in a 2D environment very, very easily, without necessarily having to learn about 3D and. Because, you know, like learning 3D is always, you know, I bet you've all tried it. Okay,
like a couple of times.
Like
Yeah.
I have countless 3D applications that I purchased on my computer, but you know, then you do a sphere and you, oh cool, like, I made the sphere, and then you know you put some light on it and some textures, and you say, yeah, I dig 3D,
Right.
and then it gets complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you want to do something that's actually like very realistic. Like all
Yeah.
the designs yesterday, that are like the packaging examples are such a good example
Yeah.
where like that really helps you if you're working for a client
Yeah.
or something, go the extra mile to be like,
Yeah.
here's the package on the shelf, here's it in the house, here's like, yeah.
So yesterday on day one of this Adobe live stream here live from Adobe Max 2017, we had Corey Barker with us. You can watch the replays on YouTube, on the Creative Cloud YouTube channel, and he did a full demo of Adobe Dimension. There's so many names. I always, you know,
I'm trying not to say the code names. That's like the
I
hardest part of our
know, the
job.
old names, yeah.
Someone asked about getting the materials into Dimension. So the great thing is everything you capture in Capture gets saved into a Creative Cloud library.
Yes.
And so if you go to the libraries panel in Dimension, it'll just be sitting there waiting for you.
Yeah.
And you can just drag it out onto your canvas. You can be
Yes.
shooting and dragging stuff out. It's pretty cool. And same with the fonts. If you capture a font and then I can actually show you that one.
Yeah.
If I go back into Illustrator, and then I will select the font. If I go to my libraries, you'll see this is the character style I just captured. And so with one click, it gets applied. And so I went from a font in a photo to using an Illustrator. All I do is click Save here and click Apply here, and it's everything else Creative Cloud takes care of.
Yeah. And Alexandre Becquet from France just said, just tested material with Capture and use it in Dimension. It's so cool.
That's awesome.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Test it out. It's all there in the Creative Cloud. All right, let's get back to you, Ash.
Yeah, sure. Speaking of libraries, I think this is a good segue into this first thing that I showed yesterday.
And we're in Photoshop.
We are in Photoshop. This is one of the new little features we have, which is layer styles in libraries. This is super useful. So if I have something fancy like this, it's super easy for me to just like add that into the library and it's there. But what's awesome is like I can create this reusable repository of all these different styles, and I can share these. I can use them across files. Like, it's just like really easy and awesome. Yeah, and just to prove, Eric and I do have our shared library, but like it's all in here, so it works across apps too, which is really nice if you have like a brand or a style guide, so you can see here all the typefaces and colors and everything, even Eric's color themes that he picked up from television shows. So it all works really seamlessly. Yeah, so it's great if you're working on a team or on a project and has like any complexity. So that's been really nice.
Yeah. Or if you're like what I do also is sometimes just share a library with the viewers here on Adobe Live, so they can try things out. You know, like maybe even the shared folders, which is another thing in the Creative Cloud, where you can put things in and then share that with everybody. I shared, for example, a 3D model of myself. And
I'm going to add some of my materials to the 3D model.
Exactly.
Marble.
Actually,
wood.
one of my Project Felix, now Dimension, actually got featured on Behance today with my model. Yeah, like
that's awesome.
me standing on an airplane wing while it's flying. Like
So that wasn't real.
No, of course not, but it looked so real.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess the other thing I can show off, so I don't have a draw thing tablet, but the brush organization was like a huge thing for me. You can now organize these into folders, which is really, really handy, and they all have these nice previews. 'Cause I'm always like forgetting which brush I picked and which I was using for some piece, and then if, you know, I close enough Photoshop at the wrong time or something, and then the brushes all get lost, and you're like, oh, this is like, is not going to look the same.
Especially when you have Kyle's mega pack.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Kyle has a lot of
Yeah.
brushes. So that's really exciting. This is one of my like favorite things. I know everyone's been asking for it, and
Yes,
so
that is a
really
long
cool.
time
One
request.
of the biggest feature requests for years. And
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And then the new brush smoothing is also really cool. Where let's see if we can get this to work actually with this trackpad. Maybe that will really demonstrate it. But so if I go ahead and like draw something on here, it's like really shaky. I'm curious how this will work with. So that's without brush smoothing. It's like
Have you ever used AstroPad on your iPad? No?
No.
That's so
yeah,
awesome.
I have. It's great.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it like it functions as a?
Yeah, basically Photoshop is on your iPad and you draw.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Let's delete that. So now, if like first, what's really nice is like you have this control over smoothing, which is super good. But also these options are like really awesome. The adjust for zoom is one that I was like yes, because this means like no matter what zoom level, Photoshop knows and it'll compensate your stroke smoothing. And then stroke catch up is pretty cool. See how this? I actually haven't done this with a mouse yet, so let's see. But yeah, so you'll see it gets like dragged along. I mean, even this is like much smoother than what we were seeing before, but.
Oh, drawing with the trackpad.
I know.
Yeah.
It's not too bad.
Yeah,
too
not
bad.
But it's nice because it's just like super smooth. I mean, like this is like better than I've gotten sometimes with like a tablet, and this is with a trackpad, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's really handy and nice. So.
And the other thing that I find awesome is that you just import brushes in the brushes panel now and not in the presets or things like that.
Oh
like,
yeah.
you know.
So yeah, it used to be you had to like go in here and like dig through. You can see I have like my zillion brushes here, but yeah, this is like so much nicer that it all is in there.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is, so it used to be that you'd have ABR brushes in the brush panel and TPLs and tool presets. And so the Photoshop team has added a ton of capabilities to ABR, so you just have everything in your brushes panel. If you try to import a TPL, it will ask you if you want to move it over. I think you can even like double click on ABR on the desktop and it just installs. Like they've really simplified that flow, which is so nice because managing brushes in the past was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because frankly, there are things we don't want to think about. You know, like.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? It's a brush.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to know what kind of brush it is. I just want to use it. You know.
Want to get down to business.
Just want to make something beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so making that all easier.
All right. Awesome. Anything else that you want to show in Photoshop?
No, I think those are the big ones, unless you can think. I know there's support now, you can edit 360 photos.
Yes.
From 360 cameras. I know that was like a
I have to try that out because I always use my Theta.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to get one of those. Do you like it?
Oh, they're awesome.
Yeah, they look really cool.
Yeah. And being, you know, this is one of the questions on the Theta forums and on the 360 photography forum that, you know, that's been asked over and over again. How do I edit my photos? And if Photoshop can do that now, I think that's an incredible, great addition. You know, especially for removing the tripod that always remains, and things like that, or the part at the top that kind of gets together. So definitely something I want to try out. As soon as Max is over, I'll
scurry over to update with our
we have free time
Wi-Fi. Play with the camera stuff.
Free time, yes. Don't make me feel old. All right. Anything else you guys want to show?
I mean, there's a couple more little things I can show in Illustrator.
We have about 15 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So let's move back to you, Eric.
So back in Illustrator, one of this was like a surprise hit from yesterday. I was like, and for people who've used animation tools like Adobe Animate, they've had things like this for a while. But you know, in Illustrator, I've got this illustration. It's not simple, but it's not overly complicated. But even for something reasonably simple, if I want to move the hand and
Yeah.
I mean,
not
really.
We had a great example yesterday.
Bad things.
So
we
scary.
had Shama Golden on the stream with us, and she was creating patterns with a very intricate design with trees and a hammock and a person lying in the hammock and the arm, which was kind of in the way of the trees. And this feature would allow you to just move the arms just ever so slightly out of the way, which in Illustrator before was super complicated because you had to really go through all the Bezier points and correct it manually, really.
So it's pretty interesting. So there's this new tool, the Puppet Warp tool. It looks like a little push pin, and the way it works is you actually place pins in your illustration. So if I do one in the shoulder, one in the elbow, and one in the hand, what happens is it locks the points you don't have selected, and the other ones can move freely. So I can sort of make this character wave, and that'd be pretty hard to do in older versions of Illustrator.
Yep. So you can do that in Photoshop, of course, but Photoshop is pixel based. Therefore, the distortions and things can be kind of weird. But in Illustrator, it remains vector based and therefore resolution independent and so cool.
Another thing for people who are, we see some questions about people who are new to some of this stuff. Another feature that I really like in Illustrator is the new Learn panel. And so the teams have been really focused on making sure that while the apps in the UI are getting hopefully simpler and easier to use, that we've got tutorials, we've got things to help you get started, and that's going to be a focus for us moving forward to make sure that anybody who wants to learn this stuff should be able to learn it. I mean, I've never been on Adobe Live before, but I've watched a ton of them, and it's great for this sort of stuff, right? And so I think that's really important for us as a team, is to make sure that the tools we're working on are accessible to as many people as
and we're coming
possible.
back to that conversation we had earlier, is that the tools are complex. There's nothing to say against that. I mean, they've been around for such a long time, and things have been added. But the thing I always say is, don't be overwhelmed by the complexity of the tool. Just focus on the things you need to do right now. And I think little help, how can we say, little help nuggets like that can be super useful. Before, like you do, like everybody else does, just go on YouTube and find somebody who shows you that. Or of course, be here on Adobe Live. Because the really cool thing about Adobe Live, like you mentioned, is that you actually see designers and artists and illustrators and motion designers, video experts working with the tool and really showing how they do it, and it's super inspiring. I think we have quite a few people here in the chat who are long-time followers, and I think they're learning a lot.
Good.
Tell me if I'm wrong, people. Ryan, I'm talking to you. Alexandre, I'm talking to you. Jan Eric.
They have to keep you honest because we know,
So the Puppet Warp tool is awesome.
And it just shows that the team is really working on improving every piece of the experience, right? From like overall UI enhancements to new libraries work to individual tools to workflows. It's content like all of Kyle's brushes. Like there's a lot of new stuff coming, and we announced 4 new products yesterday with XD, Dimension, the new Lightroom, and then Character Animator, which got like one slide, but that's a whole new tool.
That's one thing I have to dive into. I've never really used it.
It's so fun. Like you can do it when you're alone because you're like animating in front of your camera and you look ridiculous, but it's really fun and you can get into it. And it comes with a bunch of pre-built, like rigged characters. You can just start to animate and sort of get into it, and then you can make your own in Illustrator and Photoshop. It's a super fun tool.
You mentioned you had a file full of icons?
Yes. I can try to dig it up.
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
Well, while you're digging that up, one thing I did forget to mention was the pen curvature tool, which is actually really handy on Photoshop. It's been in Illustrator. I think it's funny because yesterday somebody's like, "When's this coming to Illustrator?" It's like 2 years ago. But this one's like pretty fun. So we can zoom in here. We're gonna like do a little heart under this king. So let's turn on the grid. Just makes it a little bit easier. But the pen curve tool is just under pen right here, so you'll see it's like that third one. What's really cool about this, it's like, let's just start drawing a heart and then we'll adjust the position later. But So you'll see here as I put in those first 2 points, business as usual, but once that third point comes in, that curve gets auto-extrapolated, so you don't have to like fight with the anchor points or anything. You can just set that in. And this is really great if you're doing like a symmetrical shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're doing a symmetrical shape, you don't have to worry about like doing half and then like duplicating it and be like, oh, this doesn't quite look right. I think that's even. And then of course it's like a pen tool, so you can do it as usual. So it's like super easy to do shapes like this, and then like, you know, you can do them really fast. It's like make this a little bit smaller because it's enormous.
And I think you can even define the thickness of that line, right?
Oh yeah, I mean you can do all these things. Like we can make this no fill. We can give it like a stroke and have it be an outline instead.
Or the tool itself, no?
Oh, the tool itself?
Yeah, I think I saw that somewhere. So much to learn.
I know, it's like, it's
never
so
mind.
much, I know. So it's like super easy to just pop that in there. And yeah, it's just like, especially for shapes like this, it's like, you know, like everybody's drawn like a heart like 3,000 times. And you're just like, oh, where's that file where I have like my heart? So it just makes that super fast and easy.
Yeah, and these tools were actually made in Illustrator first, and then in Photoshop to make it easier for people starting with vector lines.
Yeah.
Because the click and drag and all the keyboard shortcuts to make the junction points and things like that, it takes a lot of getting used to and a lot of training. And me, who's been doing it for over 20 years,
you eventually
not a big problem. But for somebody starting with curves and Bezier lines, I think it's super easy.
Yeah. And what's really cool is I think somebody here mentioned that like, oh, Illustrator panel looks like XD. We definitely like work across all of our teams. To any learnings we have, we transfer it to other products, so that as like many people as possible get access to those new features. So.
Yeah. And I think it's not just the curvature tool. A lot of the type stuff I showed in Illustrator is also in Photoshop, so the variable fonts and color fonts are both in there. So really trying to coordinate across teams to make sure we introduce these new features. It's in your favorite tool. So I think there's a bunch of different, those are the ones popping into my head, but there's a bunch of examples of things that we only got to show in one. Like you showed dial support yesterday in Photoshop, there's dial support in Illustrator. We just didn't have time to show it in all the different applications.
Dial support? You mean,
but with the surface.
Like,
yes, with the surface, yes.
Yeah.
And then, so I found my icon file.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not even mine, but it's an icon file from Adobe.
Oh, it's so big.
And so this file has 513 artboards. I mean, it's super smooth. Performance increases have been great. And that's a ton of artboards. So I think people at the beginning were asking, like, why do you need more than 100 artboards? And so this is a great example of if you've got a complex identity system with tons of icons, you want to see them next to each other, you want to see how they fit together, if the weights all match, you don't want them in multiple files, you want them in a single source of truth. And so this has 513 artboards, which 2 days ago wasn't possible in Illustrator. And now you can go up to 1,000.
I like that. 2 days ago wasn't possible.
Which is wild.
And a feature I didn't get to show yesterday that I really like, if you select the artboard tool, there are the ability to auto rearrange your artboards. So if you think about it, the more and more artboards you get, the more unorganized you can become, especially if you're working very quickly. And so being able to set how you want it to relay out, the number of columns, spacing, whether you want to move the artboard or not, it's pretty awesome just to be able to click one button and have everything relay out. And so as you're scaling and doing more artboards, you can still keep sort of consistent and organized.
And the reason why this is important for people who design icons and things like that is that then you can export these artboards as PNGs or SVG, scalable vector graphics, in one simple operation, and then these things can then be used by other people down in the workflow.
Yeah. Someone's asking a question about variable fonts.
Yeah, variable fonts don't have set weights. You can customize them.
Yeah, so I mean I can show that again because I think some people join later on, and I've.
Yes, Sarah's saying, can you repeat how to use the variable fonts? So let's repeat that because we have 5 more minutes.
Okay, I will go quickly. So the fonts have to be made a certain way. So font manufacturers are making all these new fonts. There are, I believe, 6 that ship with this version of Photoshop and Illustrator, so you have some you can play around with, and there's some great open source ones out there. This is
more to come on Typekit, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this is Acumen, which is, I believe, a font that Adobe's created. And if I select it, you know, I'm using the properties panel. I can show you in the type menu as well, but in the properties panel, if I go into my advanced options, this little variable font button here, this will only show up if it's a variable font. And you can actually tell if it's a variable font if I go into my font menu. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but you see this VAR, that lets you know that it's a variable font. And so once you've got a variable font, I can go into my advanced options here, and I will get sliders. And the sliders are controlled by whoever's made the font. So this font maker chose to expose weight, width, and slant as their 3 options.
That's sick.
Yeah, and you can see how like you can get exactly the slant you want if you're trying to match something.
And you know what I find fascinating about that? It's not like I would like when I see you doing that to the font, I'm like freaking out inside, like whoa, what are you doing here? but in this case, it actually, you know, like number 1 rule is don't distort fonts.
Yes.
But in this case, it's not distorting the font because this is exactly how the type designer actually designed the font.
Yes.
So I can live with it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the great thing is you know you're following best practices because the font maker has control over their creation. They can make sure you're not doing something crazy with it unless they want to let you do something crazy with it. And it's really exciting. I think it's one of the biggest changes in type that we've seen in a long time. And this feature is in Photoshop and in Illustrator.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can't wait to try it out. If you two, I don't know, I don't understand your question, Alexandra. Really happy with the new features, but still miss Macromedia freehand. Yes, avocado branding. I'm sorry, but
I don't know what to say about that.
no comment.
Yeah.
And font distortion kills me when I see it. That's right, Roxanne, but
kills us all.
That's what I was just mentioning. It's not really font distortion in that case because this is what the font designer actually allowed. Yes. And you know, it was like at the early days of the other page layout application allowed you to do the faux italics and the faux bold, you know.
Yes.
And InDesign actually, at the very beginning, InDesign 2, I think, actually prevented you from doing that.
Yes.
You know, unless there was a bold or an italic in the font, you know, and then you could still do it, but it was harder to apply a full bold or full italic. Yeah.
So we also hate font distortion.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the font creators.
So we say together,
they probably hate it the most.
Font distortion. Yeah. Awesome, and the color fonts as well, like I said, is a very interesting new depth to font design, and I think the Gilbert font is a very good example.
It's really beautiful.
That was actually designed to remember the designer of the rainbow flag, right? And that's why all of these colors are in it.
Yep.
So. And then there's applications like Font Self that allow you to do these colored fonts and use them right away. Incredible plugins for Photoshop and Illustrator. All right, guys. Any last words that you want to say to our Adobe Live audience here?
I want one of those.
Yeah,
you want one of
I'm
those?
going to steal that away from you.
No, this one stays right there on the table.
Glued to the table.
Operating art director. That's right, Roxanne. Thanks so much for posting the link.
Yeah.
You guys stay tuned because the stream will continue in just a second with Carrie Pack, hosted by Michael Shays. So stay tuned here on bnet/live, and the stream will resume in exactly 5 minutes. See you guys. Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Ash.